Hi everyone, I'm Grandmaster Magesh Panchanathan. Welcome to Prochess Training's training game analysis. So we're going to see what training games were played last week, and we're going to go over those analysis as always. Hey Rudra, hi. I'll give it a couple of minutes to get things going. I think we had two positions last week. We had this very interesting game with a famous story, and there is another game after this. Of course, we'll go over both of them. Yeah, and want to make sure my audio is good and we're all good to go. All right, I'll start talking about the position in just 30 seconds. Give a chance for everyone to come in. Voice is very low. Okay, let's see. Audio is clear. So Devansh, maybe it might be from your side. Thanks, Vansh. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Yeah. So, I mean, I've noticed that we are getting a lot of pawn sacrifices and piece sacrifices as part of our theme, which is fun, I think, particularly when it's a training game. The only tricky part I feel with that is that when you start a game and you have to make a very important decision in the very first move, that kind of becomes a little unfair or difficult to the first player who's playing it. And I'm saying this as part of a player who has done in other training games. I've played part of training games too. And when I see a position, I have to make the first move and I know it's kind of a critical move, it becomes very, very tricky. So by the way, this is a game Mikhail Tal was playing white. And so actually he played c4 here and bishop to a6 was played. And this was the position I believe was given to all of you to play as part of your training game. I don't know if anyone recognizes this or if anyone has seen this particular game before. I think it's very fascinating. It also has a nice story behind it. We'll talk about both. But the point of what I was talking about is white has a very important decision to make right now. Yeah. So there is a simple pin. That's what black is saying. Okay. I'm not moving the knight. There is a pin. And white is like all over black's pieces on the king side. I mean, like white's pieces are all over black's king side, right? Any minute you could launch a deadly attack and you're all set there. But okay, so here's a simple practical problem. To save this pawn, you want to play a move like this, but that runs into knight c3. So you cannot play something like c3, b3, and you definitely don't want to go back. Yeah, so that's really not like usually what you want to do. At some point, maybe rook c8 will also happen next, and this is what black is hoping on how this game would go. But the problem with this move is that black is kind of ignoring the initiative that white has built up on the king side, and typically big sacrifices or like forcing sequences start with a move like this. And I'm saying this, I've also done moves like this from black side, where I would be so focused on some specific target and something, I sometimes ignore the initiative that's built on the other side, right? And this happens to everyone. I've been on white side and black side in such situations, right? So let's take a small pause to see what would be the best move for white here. What do you think would be the best move? I hope most players played this move, because even if you didn't find the exact sequence, I would say this is the most interesting move in the position. But you cannot play it without seeing the next follow-up. So that's the tricky part of this, right? Most sacrifices work great if you just see an instant follow-up. But here, it's a little tricky, right? If you're watching this as a video later on, I would recommend pause it. If you're thinking about it right now, try to recollect what you played in your training game. And now let's look at what happened in the game. So Mikhail Tal decides to sacrifice. Knight takes g7. Now, okay, what's the big deal? Most of the sacrifices, we have an instant follow-up, right? Procher knight g5 is very interesting. It's possible. But okay, knight g7 was played in the game. And the idea is after king takes g7, okay, my stuff is freezing up. Let's see if... oh, Starfish is running on the side. That takes away all the load. Okay, king takes g7, and now the follow-up move is what is required. So king takes g7. Now what do I do, right? If I don't see an immediate follow-up, this is when we usually give up on these kind of sacrifices, right? But there's actually a very strong follow-up. It's not usually this is not a typical follow for a sacrifice, knight to d4. I mean, simply centralizes the knight and creates a threat on e6. Most of the time you're expecting something else. This is a subtle move, but it's very strong, right? I have this threat, I have this threat, I have this threat. I mean, I would say queen g4 is not really that much of a threat, but queen h5 could become a major problem, right? Combined with knight e6. So knight d4 is the key move. And I believe if you're playing this game or if you're trying to solve this situation, the key move to find was knight d4. I think knight g7 most people would immediately look at, right? So I see knight d4 in chat, very good. So I'll play this, and there are two possible defending moves for black right now, right? Again, if you're in chat right now, I would recommend that you try to find these moves and tell me what it is. If you're watching the video later on, pause and try to find out what are these defending possibilities. Yeah, again, I'm going to take a small 15-second pause to see if I'm getting anything, and then we will continue the analysis. Okay, the idea is basically I have to defend this pawn, right? If I don't defend this pawn, I'm in serious trouble. Yeah, knight takes e6 is creating lots of trouble. Prakhar is suggesting knight c5, very good. That's one possible move that was played in the game. The other moves, knight f4. So knight f4 and knight c5 are the two possible moves I can play to defend it. I don't know if rook e8 is really a deal, because remember, this queen g4 was not a check, big threat on the king, but it's definitely a threat on capturing here and capturing here kind of thing, right? So for example, if you play rook e8, I go check and the king moves. Now I can simply take this one, or I can take this one. So it just doesn't look right to me for black, right? Some of these moves you can simply quit and say, okay, this is not looking good. I'm not going to spend my time calculating this. And this is one of those moves that I would really reject, right? Okay, so now let's look at the more forcing sequence, even though it was not played in the game. Knight f4 is a little bit more forcing, yeah? So, but okay, white has enough play. So knight f4, so basically a queen has to go. Now, I think queen's move is kind of obvious because you don't have queen h5. Queen g4 check is almost the only move you can play here, which can keep the initiative. And king goes to h8. Again, let's think of options for white here. One option kind of stands out, as always, but let's see. I think there are two possible moves for white here. So let's think about it and see which one you want to play. A few seconds of pause in most of these positions to just give you enough time to think. All right, so white has two ideas. I can take the rook and start collecting material, or I can take this pawn and continue the attack and keep the pressure on. Maybe this opens up too. But there is no other very serious threats I can think of, right? I mean, like, I could attack h7 if that'll be nice, but I cannot. I have no squares to do that. Nothing else seems very interesting to me, right? Bishop g3 is actually not a bad idea, Prakhar, yeah, because you want to get rid of this and then play knight e6, yeah? So that's actually possible. We should probably keep that as well. But okay, there are moves like rook g8 and other things we have to calculate. So let's take a look at bishop takes 8. That's the best move. Knight e6, unfortunately, I don't think will work well, because after knight takes, queen takes, I might even be able to play bishop c4 and bishop takes f1. I have not seen this variation entirely, so I have to think a little bit. I also have bishop takes followed by knight c5, but then that allows bishop takes f6. So let's play it out. Check king here, and if I try to move the knight, I think this would be clearly winning for white, because one, you will pick up this rook, two, you will pick up that rook. So that's too many rooks that black will lose. So I cannot play this bishop h2, knight c5. The knight is guarding f6, so I do like that. What can we do? If I play a rook over here and they take one of the piece, I take this and I hit this. So that looks very interesting. So let's try this. Rook e8. The reason I like this is because I'm hitting this one, right? So first, of course, the queen's under attack. Bishop f6 doesn't work because I take with the knight. And any other move I can technically sacrifice if I want to. But I can also just move my knight to defend the second rank. So that's, or the 7th rank. So if you take the bishop though, takes, and when I take this, the beauty is I'm hitting your bishop while you're hitting my knight. So I will still end up having extra material, yeah? So Knight e6 is possible, but looks like knight e6 rook e8 seems simple enough. Bishop takes a8. And I think now white is kind of better. Yeah, it's not very difficult to evaluate this position, because after bishop takes c4, we have actually there is a bishop g3 move right now, I think, which can be interesting. The thing is, the bishop on 8 can be captured, because if you do that, now the same variation we saw early on will matter. Knight e6, queen e6, and you will end up losing one of these pieces, or allow bishop takes f6. This is all too many threats for black to handle, and there is no rook e8 kind of defense anymore. So white is just completely winning here. Yeah. Rook e7 Procher. I don't know if you're talking about in the previous variation. I don't think rook e7 was possible. Black rook was on e4. So you'll have to check that variation again. All right. So anyways, this is what could have happened in the game, but instead black played knight c5, which is actually not that bad. I mean, it's still a decent defending move on e6. Yeah. So this is very natural. So knight is defending e6. It's also ready to trade off on e4, which I think is important. Because when you get rid of that bishop, most of the attack stops. So that's not a bad idea at all, right? So queen g4 check, king goes in, and knight takes e6, right? So again, very natural, expected. Knight takes e6, and queen takes e6. So again, all of this seems very almost natural and forcing. There's nothing special about any of these moves. And now again, Tal is counting on winning one of these pieces back because of the skewer, yeah? If you play bishop takes c4, which I am just trying to consider what might happen. Oh yeah, so same thing. I can take this, that immediately threatens this. So that's the reason I think this would not be a great position for black, because after bishop c4, bishop d5, bishop takes f6 is always a threat, right? So this is a serious problem. So after queen takes e6, black plays rook e8. This has been like our defense that we have been talking about so far, right? So rook e8, queen has to take the knight, and this is the kind of position that you have to evaluate like very early in the game, which is very tricky, right? Because the one interesting thing is black still gets to pick up a pawn and pick up an exchange. If you're not careful, you have to be, you still have to calculate 3 more moves. So go back here and start thinking about this. Can you calculate all of this when you play knight takes g7? Not so easy, right? So the famous story goes like this. Tal, I think he also, this is from his own words, he was thinking about this position and he was considering knight takes g7, and he spent, I think, a lot of time, like maybe 40 minutes or to an hour, and then he took knight takes g7. But the funny thing is, during this whole hour or 40 minutes, he was not entirely calculating variations alone. I mean, he might have exaggerated the story a little bit to make it funny. I'm sure most of his time that he was spending was calculating. But at some point in his calculation, he lost his chain of thought, and he suddenly started thinking about a different problem. And he was trying to wonder what happens if a hippopotamus gets stuck in a swamp. How would you get it out? And he was not thinking about it casually. He was sitting there thinking how, like, all engineering methods to actually get it out, like not like a casual, oh, how would you get it out, right? So that became a very, very famous story, because the next day in the newspapers, apparently they published saying Mikhail Tal spent 1 hour calculating his variations and then made this brilliant knight sacrifice to win the game. And he laughs about it because he was saying he was obviously not spending the whole time calculating the knight sacrifice. He was actually figuring out how to get a hippo from a swamp. And in the end, he's like, whatever it is, let's get the knight sacrifice going, because he intuitively felt it. Because it's almost impossible to calculate all these variations. And that's very important to know. There are some positions where you just play very precisely. There are some positions where you play intuitively, right? So here, you have to find certain moves to play this. If you play knight g7, you better find knight d4. And you better find knight c5 and knight f4 as defending moves. Then you find this idea of taking on e6, which clearly creates a skewer to win the piece back and puts the pressure on f6. If you see up to this much, I would say it's a good start, right? And of course, stronger players calculate a lot more than that. But when you start, the most important thing is to not get lost in random variations. I've given this position to my students, and a lot of times they'll be calculating the rook e8 for a long time, when we know that's just not a good move for black. So it's very important that you focus on the clear important variations. So anyways, in the game, after knight c5, queen g4 check, this knight takes, queen takes, and rook e8, queen d5 happen. I believe the best move is queen takes c4 in this position, which still leads to pretty reasonable game for black. But here, black eventually faltered. We played bishop, actually here, yeah, bishop h to king h1, and now queen takes c4. It's probably a strong continuation for black because I'm trading queens, I'm picking up this one, right? I think white's still better in the endgame, but it's not like completely losing for black. But in the game, I think he played queen f4, which turns out to be a big mistake because the problem is now he doesn't get to, he doesn't get to defend. He gets into trouble very quickly. So after queen h5, we're threatening mate, so queen takes e4 was played, and then rook f e1. So he's forcing the game to queen against two rooks position, which is actually kind of hopeless. If you do take this, rook takes, king takes. White's already up a pawn, and on top of it, it's a really bad king and a terrible bishop. So usually queen against two rooks, the one thing you have to keep in mind is the king safety. If the queen is playing against a weak king, the queen is usually very, very strong. So you have to be super, super careful about that. So after rook e1, queen g6 was played. Queen takes, pawn takes, and this nice intermediate move, very critical. Bishop takes f6. And once the king moves, rook straight off, and king takes h2. So at this point, black is up 2 pawns. White is up 2 pawns. Black picks 1 back up. So after all of this, it's still 1 pawn. It's not, it's not like a lot. But in this endgame, I think white has very clear winning chances, particularly because the rook is going to be very active. So, there are lots of opposite color bishop endgames where you might not think this is a great thing, but this particular endgame, I think white's chances are very strong. He went rook d7, and then he went on to win the game, converting these 2 pawns. So I'm not going to go through the endgame completely. We're going to stop this over here and move on to the next position. By the way, again, very interesting game. I want you to check it out. It's a very interesting story. Hopefully the story will stick and you will be able to remember it. But going back to the initial position, knight takes g7 is very precise. Actually, after c4, bishop a6 is the position you played. Knight takes g7 is very precise, yeah? All right, now let's go on and load the next position. I believe the next one was interesting pawn sacrifices. Let me just make sure I got the right one. Yes. I also have a couple of positions from last session that I have not gone over. So I don't know if we'll have time to do that, but if I'm not able to do it right now, of course, I'll make a video of this and then just put those analysis in video and you'll be able to go through that. Now let's see if we can grab. Okay, got this position. All right, the next game we are about to see is a nice game by Kasparov. And we're talking about pawn sacrifices in this game. So let me pull this board up here. And make sure you guys can see it. There it is. Okay, so hopefully all of you can see the new position right now. Again, I'm starting it from one move before. This was the position I had given. Not this the position, the one move after. Bishop takes, queen takes is the position I had given actually. So I'm just starting one move before just to have a context, right? Again, that's usually something that's nice. So after bishop takes, queen takes, if knight takes, this fi idea is always possible, and then still the same idea from the game is still possible. So let's watch this. Queen takes. Right? What do you think is the best move for white? Kasparov played this, and I hope players in the training game actually figured this out and played this because it's a very natural move. Prakar, correct. Very nice, right? So when you have a bishop like this, you might think this is a terrible bishop, because it's just behind all the pawns. But there's also huge potential for this bishop to become strong. If this bishop ends up, think of, let's say, e5. That's going to be amazing, right? So you can reverse the roles by reaching the other side of the pawn chain. If you're stuck on the bad side of the pawn chain, your bishop will be terrible, right? And if you end up going to the other side, your bishop will go awesome. So, and here, of course, there is a clear chance to do that with d5 because your bishop ends up going here. Now, I have seen a common problem where players would do this and say, you know what, I'm going to do that next move. There are two reasons I don't like it. One is, of course, you've given your opponent a move to deal with your threat. The second thing is you're also obvious. You're not being subtle about your plan. You're literally putting your bishop behind a pawn saying, I want to push it, right? So your opponent is easily going to spot it. He doesn't have to, really be prophylactic thinker to stop your plan. You're literally giving away your plan. They're going to blockade. And then that's it, right? Okay, I mean, white can still figure out some ways, but the bishop is stuck for a while now, right? So in the game, Kasparov played d5. Very nice move. Very logical move, very intuitive move. Pawn takes and bishop c3. Now, is white winning instantly? No, right? White's definitely not winning instantly, but you can already tell that this move was worth it. I mean, the way you have your bishop's diagonal, this bishop cannot even challenge you anywhere, right? I mean, if this bishop wants to challenge you, it has to be here, here, or here, and all of them are guarded by pawns. So how am I even going to do that, right? So this bishop becomes a monster, and the king becomes extremely weak. So once you see that, you can say this is a sacrifice that's very well worth doing it. Why not queen takes d5? I don't think that's going to change much, Prakar. I'll still play bishop c3, yeah? What's the difference? I'm going to play mostly the same ideas. It's not really changing much. So, it was white to play, and white played d5 very quickly, and that's the key, right? Pawn takes d5, bishop c3, and yes, bishop c5 and other moves can be played, Prakar, but I don't think it's going to make that big a difference, okay? The activity of the c3 bishop still remains the same. Bishop to d4 was played, rook c4, and rook takes, pawn takes, and queen to d2. So here I think it's already game over because the queen's coming in, and some simple threats like bishop takes followed by check has become very strong, right? Basically, if you play something like, what can we play here? Actually, I think black did allow white to do all of this, but no matter what, I'm basically taking and checking it on c3 or on d4, right? The king is so weak that I cannot even block, and your pawn chain is so strong, you're guarding the key blocking squares. So that's exactly how Kasparov went on to win this one. He played bishop takes g7, king takes g7, queen d4 check. The finish is pretty straightforward, yeah? Because after rook f6, I mean, like, now what can I do? Bishop e5, I lose a piece. Rook f6 is like the only thing to lose an exchange. But the beauty is Kasparov was mean and said, I don't even want to take your rook yet. He starts with a little bit more ruthless plan. f5, bishop e5 was played. Okay, otherwise pawn takes, rook takes, and I win that rook for free. I don't lose a knight. So bishop e5 was played, takes, and then bishop takes, and he didn't even take pawn takes d4, which again is winning. He played e7. So Kasparov is just extremely precise in that way, yeah? Very ruthless. So this is not a difficult position. I hope everyone who played this position was able to play the idea d5. And if you didn't, it's okay. Queen takes d5, I don't think so. Let's see, d5, queen takes d5, bishop here, bishop here. I mean, maybe you can fight on a little bit more, but I'm not so sure if this is really going to change much, okay? One of the things I would think about is some kind of ideas along the, along the file. I want to do something along the file. I also want to do something to switch the knight. I just feel like you don't have enough here. Probably knight g4 is a good idea with the idea of rook d1, right? At some point, knight f6. I mean, how are you going to survive this onslaught? Knight g4, let's say I play queen h3, then I go knight f6. Maybe you can prolong it a little bit more, but white's activity and black's king is just very obvious to say that it's very, very difficult for black to hold on to this. Yeah? All right, so we have a couple of these games. Yes, it is definitely much better for white. And both of these games are played by two aggressive players. One is Kasparov in this game, sacrificing a pawn without an immediate win, right? You didn't find an immediate win after the pawn sack. It just gave you such a strong position that you're in the driving seat. And then you had Mikhail Tal's beautiful knight sacrifice, which was part calculation, part intuition, right? So keep this in mind when you play the training games in the future. The first move could be a critical point, right? So you have to decide that, right? And I agree, it's not easy to make these decisions in 15 minutes because I'm giving you a game that maybe Kasparov played in a classical time format, which he can play for 7 hours, whereas you guys are playing 15 minutes each for half an hour. So, okay, there are some shortcomings there, but try your best to understand the importance. Like, if you think the position is critical, I hope you spend at least 5 minutes, right? If you start the position, you think it's not that big a deal, okay, take a minute and play the move. So you have to keep an eye for this. It's very important as part of the training games for you to just take your look at the board, understand what is going on before you make that first move, okay? All right, so that should be a good place for us to conclude. I think we did good here, and like I've always recommended, keep trying to schedule the training games. I do want you guys to try to play the training games as much as possible. The tournaments are there. We, by the way, have a tournament coming up in Lichess that is next week. I'm going to actually share the link in chat directly. Let's see. And Vansh might also be able to put it in, but in any case, I should be able to. Oh, not signed in. No wonder I can't put this. Once if you have it, you can pull it up too. If not, I'm going to take it. Okay, so we have 3-2 casual on April 11th. That's right. Yes, I'm putting it in chat here, and you can just click on it and join. But before you join, you have to join our public group. It's a free tournament, and we expect to have a lot of people playing in it, and we also are hoping. It'll be just a fun event, and the winner of the tournament usually gets some discounts in joining into Pro Chess Training as well, right? So, all right, with that, I think we'll sign off. Thanks for all of you guys, and if you're watching this in a video again, remember to keep pausing at the right place in the future videos as well. That's the best way you can get. Best you can get out of these training game analysis. So you want to put yourself in that situation where you're trying to make the decision and then compare yourself with what happened in the game. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.